Serious, what's the most real paranormal story you know? So me and my friend were in Scouts, camping. Around 16 years old. The site we went to had the old army-style tent you see, looks like a mini lodge with a short pole on each corner and two long ones in the center to give it a house look. We had a tent to ourselves after putting it up. We chose a platform away from most of the group as we were older by a couple of years. It was on a hill and you could stand under the far edge of the foundation. It was a steep hill that you would have to climb up the hill and come in from one side. Going to sleep one night, me and him and just shooting the shit, sitting on our cots, and someone kicks the far end of my cot. But I was looking at it at the time and no, I didn't see the canvas touch the cot, so it wouldn't have been someone kicking the side of the tent into my cot. Weird. Happens again a few minutes later. Think it's strange. We both go to bed. I wake up soaked. It had been raining that night, and my feet are dirty and I'm tired as fuck. My buddy starts telling me of a dream he had. I woke up, ran out of the tent, down the hill to Sam's tent and asked him where's Darman, me, at? He pointed towards our tent, but I ran towards the bathroom. Not a minute later Sam comes to our tent and hands me my hat and says, you left this at my tent last night. I didn't go to his tent. He retells the whole dream my buddy had, but saying it was me that did it, not my buddy. Even saying that I, Darman, asked where is Darman. Mind you, my buddy and I looked nothing alike. He easily had 100 pounds on me and I was blonde while he had brown hair. We believe we had some weird body swap thing. I was 19 and living at home. I woke up one night and see this huge, it was almost reaching the ceiling, black hooded thing. It was just standing there next to my wardrobe. I froze and stayed in bed, too scared to move. It was there for about 10 seconds before it vanished. I had nightmares for weeks with that thing in it. Fast forward 15 years, my younger sister, who has had my old room for years, asks me if I had ever seen anything weird in the bedroom and tells me about the hooded thing that she had seen. I never told anyone about what I saw, especially not my sister who was only 4 at the time. Phew, okay, my cousin and I recalled this experience at her grandmom's house that I had blocked out of my mind. Her grandmom was bedridden at the time and the only one living in the house. We were laying in bed watching a show, bedroom door was cracked. We could hear her grandmom snoring lightly. Her room was only separated from ours by the bathroom. I get sick to my stomach thinking about this next part. We started hearing footsteps in the hall. We immediately thought her grandmom had gotten out of bed, but we still could hear her snoring. The footsteps were slow and heavy, then got closer. I was truly paralyzed with fear. My cousin sidestepped to the door and quickly closed it with a fully outstretched arm. When we told my aunt the next day, she said, yeah, imagine how I felt growing up there. They won't hurt you. We had heard stories of the house being haunted, but that was our only first-hand experience. Truly terrifying. Posted before. My mom, when she was pregnant with yours truly, saw a ghost in her bedroom. Happened when she turned the light off on the nightstand next to her, and she sees this thing just floating in the corner of the room. She tries to focus to make out what it is and she can make out a head, torso, shoulders and arms. Also seems to be clutching something like a staff against its chest. It starts to get closer to her but floating, not walking because there was no stride or sway. She can't move and is petrified by fear, so tells my dad, sleeping next to her at the time, tells him to wake up, there is something in the room. As this thing is approaching her, she sees its eyes staring right into hers. My dad finally reaches over her to turn on the light and it disappears. Fast forward. It's my 16th birthday. I have dreads and into metal music, basic high school kid I guess, and I'm sitting at the table eating my birthday breakfast of French toast and bacon in the dining room. As I am eating, she tells me this story and ends it with, every year you got older you look more like the thing I saw that night. Your eyes were the same. Her reaction when telling was so serious and almost fearful. That's what made it so damn crazy to hear. When I was a teen, my mother walked in my room, turned off my boombox and walked out. Very strange, so I go after her to see what's up and she's nowhere on the stairs. I look for her and she's having a seizure in the kitchen. There was a decent sized pool of blood from where she hit her head too. No way she could have gotten there and bled that much, even if she sprinted. Wigged me out. So in the hospital I tell her. She got really quiet for a bit, then told me she had no memory from that whole day except from the floor she could see me standing at the kitchen entryway. Then I ran past myself into the kitchen. She has no other memory until waking up in the hospital a couple of days later. Decades later, I was dozing off in her hospice room. I thought I woke up to her by my chair, hand on my shoulder, telling me to take my dad to get some pie and coffee across the street. Then I actually woke up. It was so disorienting. I figure dad needs food and some air, so I convince him to go. When we walked back into hospice, her nurse came up and told us she had just passed. I think my mom wanted my dad out of there so she could go. Witnessed this myself. My sister's cat was walking towards the door to go out of the living room. He suddenly stopped, arched his back, fur on end, and hissed at the empty doorway, before walking around 3.5 walls of the room to go out the same doorway. In the same house, I once saw a 6-foot-tall man out the corner of my eye that I thought was my brother-in-law, when in fact he wasn't home, and it turned out I was alone. Also same house, a small girl ghost had been seen by multiple people, but not me, and was known to play with my nephew's toys. My mom moved us into a new home. She was in the living room trying to hook the cable up and I was in her room roughly 10 feet away. She kept asking me to turn the TV on to see if it connected, but every time I turned it on it was loud static. When I turned the TV off after another unsuccessful attempt, there was a large solid black human-like figure standing behind me in the reflection of the TV. I was facing the only entrance and I was 100% alone in that room. It was the middle of the day but all our curtains were closed so it wasn't a reflection from outside. I ran like hell and when I told my mom she didn't believe me. My brother and I consistently had experiences over the many years we lived there. Every single night you would hear and feel someone running back and forth down the hallway. My brother and I were across the hall from each other but we were on the opposite side of the house from my mom behind a closed door with our only pet, a dog, R.I.P. So many nights we'd both look out our doors at the same time to see if it was the other person but nothing. We learned to live with it as it never stopped. Another time in broad daylight, I watched my dog walk into a room we used as storage in the same hallway. I laughed and went down the hall to get him out saying something like "Silly boy, you can't go in there," but when I turned into the room it was empty. I was super weirded out because I watched my entire dog walk in. When I got back down the hallway I then see my dog through our glass door fast asleep on the patio. There was no exit point from that room except a window that wouldn't really open, so it stayed closed and locked. I have so many other stories but when my brother and I moved out, my mom finally agreed the house was haunted. She woke up in her room to a dark human-like figure standing over her. When she turned the lamp on her nightstand on and it was gone. Growing up there were constant strange activities in my house. Electronics would turn off and on and footsteps would be heard in empty rooms. A few times when I was home alone I heard voices. The worst/creepiest was when I was a child and fixing dinner. I needed to get something from our upstairs hall pantry. I walked towards the stairs and froze. I don't know why, but I couldn't move. I was terrified. My dog came up to me then looked towards the stairs and started growling and showing his teeth. He also pushed me back so he was in front of me snapping at whatever was on the stairs. It was only my father and I home. Mother and my brother were out and we lived on the second floor. Our doors were locked and no one could get in without us knowing, so whatever it wasn't human. My father came over to see why our dog was freaking out and when I told him he said I was being silly and went to the stairs. He got to the doorway and froze. He looked scared and told me to take the dog, go get my uncle from across the street and stay outside until he said. I did as I was told. This was almost 30 years ago. I never knew what was there. They never told me. I never felt fear like that again in that house though. In my dad's childhood house, he used to see a woman dressed in white carrying a candelabra. As he grew up he chalked it up to childhood imagination. Years later, he overheard a woman at his job describing a ghost she saw in her house, a woman dressed in white carrying a candelabra. He asked where she lived and it was the same house he'd grown up in.